As we move the show forward here, we are very honored to be joined by Dr. Oleg Barabanov, who's a program director at the Valdai Discussion Club and also a professor of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Dr. Barabanov, thank you so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, it's certainly the pleasure is all ours. And I just want to start here now with what we saw really starting yesterday, the U.S. and NATO responses to Russia's proposals as it concerns how to improve security there, certainly in Ukraine and Europe more broadly. The U.S. or what Russia is saying is that they are not encouraged by the responses they got from NATO and the United States. So I'm just curious your thoughts about NATO's responses and the U.S. responses to Russia's proposal that essentially things be backed up and Ukraine not be allowed to join NATO.
Yeah, exactly. The NATO response was not made public because the first Russian proposal of the treaty for guarantees was surprisingly made public by the Russian Foreign Ministry, so everybody could read it. But now the diplomacy turned back to the hidden thing, to secret things, and NATO decided not to publish its answer and asked Russia not to do it as well. But there are some talks already. The NATO representatives, the US representatives already reacted, and for me it seems that the reaction of NATO is negative, absolutely negative for the key point of Russian concerns concerning the security in Europe and global security in general. So there are some proposals, some positive proposals, but only on some not quite important measures. So definitely we have a deadlock now.
You know, in the U.S., obviously, where we are, we're just getting. I'm sorry. I'm hearing like you're back. Okay, is that still there? Okay, sorry, I was hearing myself talk. It's gone now. But in the U.S., obviously, we're just getting this constant tsunami of anti-Russia coverage that's placing all the blame on Russia. We're only hearing the U.S. side of things. So can you give our audience an idea of how the Russians see the situation from their vantage point?
Yeah, I think that now the official American, the White House position is quite clear. They want to draw Russia into the new war. It would be a kind of revenge for the humiliating defeat, let's say frankly, of the US military in Afghanistan. More or less like it was in history, because after the Vietnam failure of the US administration, they started to organize something similar for the Soviet Union, and they did it in Afghanistan at the end of the 70s. Now they want to do the same thing. But in Russia, the official position, at least it was as it was said by the foreign ministry, by other official speakers, that Russia don't want any war with Ukraine, but Russia is ready to defend the People's Republics in the eastern Ukraine if there will be some military provocations, and if the Ukrainian military forces start the war from their side, because it's also in the West. I understand that almost everybody in the mainstream media is blaming Russia, but we also could see the scenario when the Ukrainians start the war. That's the problem.
You know, Doctor, I'm glad you laid that out, because I think that, you know, what most people get in the United States from the media is sort of like that Russia has no reason to be concerned with NATO being at its borders. So I was wondering if you could talk about the Russian perspective on that, because, I mean, maybe it seems somewhat obvious, but I think for a lot of people, that is one of the things. They're like, what is Russia so concerned about with the U.S. and NATO continually moving eastward?
Well, we see that if you have a military alliance with nuclear weapons exactly coming closer to your borders, and it is not friendly alliance for Russia, that's true, the NATO. So in that sense, sure that you must have some concerns. What will be the future? What could be the future scenarios? What are the real intentions of NATO? So in that sense, starting from the beginning of the NATO enlargement in the 90s, Russia was deeply concerned. And there were a kind of series of various promises from both NATO and the White House in the US that Russia shouldn't be threatened, that Russia shouldn't feel in a dangerous situation. But we can see that all the promises became vague. In that sense, we can see this NATO enlargement, the future NATO enlargement, possible future NATO enlargement, and taking Ukraine into NATO as another imperialist, frankly speaking, step forward in the official US policy. So in that sense, Russia is not the angels. I understand it, and I want you to understand it. The Russian leadership are also not absolutely not the angels, and we must not say in only black and white colors, because if we are saying that Joe Biden and the White House administration is bad, it doesn't mean that the Russian president is absolutely good. No. But there are some objective concerns from the Russian side, yeah.
I'm curious about the Russian perspective also, or your perspective about the situation with Europe. It's really interesting to see that Germany is refusing to get involved, and they've laid out the reasons why. Other European nations are reluctant to get behind this. Even the Ukrainian government, the pro American Ukrainian government, is repeatedly saying that they don't believe there's any coming Russian invasion. It's literally just coming from the US and the British and their anonymous intelligence officials. So, what do you think that this means for the future of European Russian relations? Because it kind of seems like the US is shooting itself in the foot here and, pushing the Europeans closer towards the Russians.
Yeah, I think you are quite right, because the European Union, mainly the continental Europe after the Brexit, the major countries of Europe like Germany, like France, like Italy, all they have quite strong economic relations with Russia, and not only receiving Russian gas and oil, but Russia is a quite big market for their machinery, for their industries, and so on. So it's quite deep economic mutual cooperation. And another thing that we can see that the United States are quite far from Ukraine. So if there will be a real military conflict, it will not make the life of the ordinary Americans difficult. But for the European Union, it could be. There could be the new waves of refugees. There could be the breaks of economic cooperations and economic chains of values. And for the Ukrainian administration, for the Ukrainian government, it's also quite clear if they follow the official American line to provoke the war, they will be the victim. The ordinary Ukrainian people will be the victim. I don't say that Russia will win this war in a style of blitzkrieg. No, it could be a terrible long war with many victims for both sides. But the Ukrainian understands that at least half of the victims will be on their side. That's the question.
The current president of Ukraine, Mr. Zelensky, ran in the elections as essentially a peace candidate. Why is it, do you think, that the Ukrainian leadership has seemingly not seemed eager to move forward with the Minsk Accords or other elements of the peace process?
Yeah, you're right. I agree with you because the majority of Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian citizens, voted for Zelensky based on his electoral platform for peace, for removing all the corruption, to removing all this, frankly speaking, chaos that was in Ukraine. In the times of their previous president, Petro Poroshenko. But I think there is, let's say, the question of environment, because Zelensky had no good advisors, no his team, because you know that he was a kind of comic stand-upper, and he invited all his colleagues from the art industry, from the comic art industry, to join the government, to join the presidential administration, to join the security services as their chiefs. I'm sure they are quite good people, basically, but they are not professional. And in that sense, the lack of professionals became very important for Zelensky for his unsuccessful path to the peace. And he also understood that, unfortunately, the pressure of ultra-nationalist forces who are strongly against Russia, who are strongly against the peace process, was quite strong. And having no team, no real supporters in the political elite, so he became what he became to be.
Finally, I just want to ask you, what are the next steps that need to be taken to draw this situation back from the brink, to reduce the danger of war?
First, it is absolutely important for me to stop the war hysteria that we see now in the mainstream media and also in the official political speeches. Because everybody is thinking that tomorrow we will have the Third World War, and the most people think on it quite seriously and are deeply concerned, and in Russia as well. But as an expert, I don't see the situation so tragic, like tomorrow we will have the World War. It's a new set. It's a new stage of traditional White House provocations to start some military campaign, to start some disturbance somewhere far from the U.S., somewhere far from the Capitol Hill. So that's the question. If we stop the media hysteria, it would be the real first step to the normalization of the situation.
Well, Dr. Barabanov, thank you so much for joining us here on Breakthrough News.